From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Here's what's coming up. Out of the Washburn University School of Law, Roger McEowen will join us to discuss part of his list of top 10 agricultural law and taxation developments of 2021. Today, he'll cover numbers 6 through 10 on that list. Also today, K-State's Ignacio Ciampitti will preview the series of K-State Soybean Schools for you producers coming up soon. And K-State's Bill Schapaugh reports that the results of the university's 2021 Soybean Variety Performance Test are now available to you growers as you finalize your seed selection for this year's production. And awaiting with another Stop, Look, and Listen, K-State's Gus van Der Hoeven. All that here on Agriculture Today. Good to have you aboard once again for another Agriculture Today. Our guest to get things started is Professor of Agricultural Law and Taxation, Washburn University School of Law, Roger McEowen. And with the rollover into each new year, Roger takes the time to pull together what he deems to be the top 10 agricultural law and tax developments of that previous year, in this case 2021. He's done so, and he's going to share in this segment numbers 10 through 6 on his list. But just as a setup here, Roger, you go over a great number of cases and material, a lot of material over a given year, and you try to pick out those things that most impact agriculture during that course.
That's right. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the application to the sector as a whole nationwide. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean we may not get a state-level development that makes the list from time to time. And, in fact, we'll talk about one of those today. But generally, these are major high-level federal courts, U.S. Supreme Court, IRS, major tax cases that have potential impact to affect all farmers and ranchers, landowners, agribusinesses nationwide. I think there are 10 developments from 2021 that really stand out.
Let's get right into numbers 10 through 6. At number 10, it is testing the reach of what's called the public trust doctrine. And at the center of this is a long-standing case concerning agricultural producers in the state of Iowa.
Yeah, it sure is. Now, that public trust doctrine originates in England, and it was first applied in the United States in a U.S. Supreme Court in 1842. And basically what it is, it derived from the view that the oceans were common property of the public. They cannot be privately used or owned, and they're held in what's known as the public trust. Well, that ultimately became part of the U.S. common law. And here in the United States, it's historically been applied only to the access of the seashore and intertidal waters. But beyond that, no application to farmland, ranch land, and such. Well, there's been this long-standing battle in Iowa for a number of years over the level of nitrates and phosphorus in an Iowa waterway and farm runoff from those fields, farm field runoff. And for about the past decade, there were certain activist groups and academics in Iowa and elsewhere across the country that have sought more regulatory control over farming practices that they deem contribute to what they think are excessive nutrients and higher drinking water prices in Des Moines and elsewhere. Well, they filed suit, again, this has been going on for a number of years, saying that, well, the legislature fails to act, and so we're filing suit asking the court to force the legislature to create legislation that would really restrict farming practices so that runoff levels would decline. And in 2021, the Iowa Supreme Court said, no, that's not our job. That is a job of the elected legislators, and we're not going to have the judicial system usurp the legislative branch. If you don't like the current status of the law, vote the people out that are not giving you the political result that you want and put people in there that will vote for the legislation that you want, but we're not going to touch this. Had the court gone the other way, this would have had major impacts across the country because other courts in other states would have seen this, and they tend to follow that as precedent when those novel issues come up.
Number 9 on the list, IRS regulations on net farm operating losses. And if one reads your article on this, layer upon layer of tax code changes that affect how net operating losses can be claimed in a tax filing, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We had one rule through 2017, and then the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act changed that going forward from 2018 to 2025. Well, then the virus hit, and Congress came in with the CARES Act and other pieces of legislation, and they made two more changes to the rules involving farm net operating losses. Primarily, the issue is how far back can I carry a net operating loss that I've been hanging on to and offset income in those prior years. Well, we've changed between 2 and 5 years, whether you have to amend a return, whether you have to make an election, is there an 80% limitation that applies, so forth and so on. This thing has gotten really twisted. It's complex. It's confusing to tax practitioners, and it's very difficult to do planning for farm clients when these rules change like this. Well, what happened in 2021 is that the IRS came out with guidance. And what the guidance does is tell us, basically, if you were carrying back your NOL 2 years, you can now elect to carry it back 5. That is very helpful to many farmers and ranchers that have net operating losses.
Number 8 on your list, agricultural nuisance litigation in the state of North Carolina. Really 2 cases here. There are challenges here to the extent to which what are called right-to-farm laws protect producers.
Yeah, this has been such an issue over the past decade, particularly in North Carolina. North Carolina seems to have been the hot spot for ag nuisance litigation involving large-scale hog confinement operations. Every state has a right-to-farm law, and the legislature in North Carolina tried to make various amendments to their right-to-farm law to provide additional protection from nuisance lawsuits. The most recent development in 2021 was that the amendments most recently enacted in North Carolina to provide additional protection by virtue of the right-to-farm law were upheld as constitutional. And I think this is a big case with nationwide implications because that'll provide further guidance to other states and what they want to do with their right-to-farm laws.
Keep watching that. That's a constant interest in agriculture for sure. Number 7 on your list, a federal court determines whether withheld taxes and other prepaid taxes can be what's called deprioritized in a Chapter 12 bankruptcy. And this is important as per the latitude of an individual who may be going through that bankruptcy process.
Yeah, this is a very important development. We've got 2 cases on this. One was in 2020 and now another one in 2021. That's why it makes the list and comes in at number 7. But a major feature of Chapter 12 farm bankruptcy, and Chapter 12 is only for farmers, persons that are engaged in the trade or business of farming or ranching. A major feature of that is the ability to deprioritize taxes, federal taxes, state taxes, local taxes, whatever the situation might be. And what that means is that taxes no longer have priority status in a Chapter 12 bankruptcy, so they don't necessarily have to be paid first in full before you get to the other general unsecured creditors. Now, the case in 2021 from Indiana, it's a federal case, follows up on a federal court case that went to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. So now we have the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals deciding a case. We've had the 8th Circuit a year before decide the issue. And the issue is, well, what if I've already paid some taxes in terms of withheld taxes? Maybe I have a spouse that has an off-farm job, is having taxes withheld. Can I bring those back into the bankruptcy estate and have those deprioritized also? The 8th Circuit in 2020 said no. And the 7th Circuit, in a weird decision, kind of said no, but also said the facts were different from the 8th Circuit case. And I think the bottom line of this, Eric, is that going forward, Chapter 12 reorganization plan should provide that if a pro forma tax return, you're kind of estimating what your taxes are going to be, shows that the debtor is owed a refund, then the government bodies will pay it. And I think that's the lesson coming out of those cases. But that's a big deal because we can have a bunch of credits. We can have a bunch of prepaid taxes. Can we pull those back in and deprioritize them? The answer is maybe if you do it right.
Number 6 on the list as we round out our conversation here, Roger, something we visited about right here in late 2021, the potential perils linked to sales of grain on a deferred payment basis and the importance of knowing the solvency status of the buyer here.
Yeah, this was a big deal that broke this past fall, hit the news in early December. But what happened was you had a group of farmers in Mississippi in the Delta area that marketed their grain to a major grain elevator. They thought that the elevator was solvent, was doing better than it had done in the past. There were representations made to that effect. But in reality, it was in dire financial straits, and its lender, UMB Bank, based out of Kansas City, was basically taking a position where they were forbearing on those notes being paid to the bank, and we're talking millions and millions of dollars of debt. And they waited, the bank did, they waited until all the grain had been in the elevator, and then they called their loans in. And when that happened, the elevator filed bankruptcy before they had paid the farmers for those grain sales, which then puts those grain farmers in general unsecured creditor status. In other words, you go to the back of the line, you're going to be behind the bank and other secured creditors. You may not get paid a thing beyond what state bonding programs or indemnity funds will provide to you, and that's not going to be much. So we shall see what happens with this, but it's a major, major lesson to all grain farmers to be very careful in these transactions and check out, to the extent you can, the financial status of that buyer before you make delivery.
There's much more detail to these items on the blog that Roger maintains on the website, washburnlaw.edu/WALTR, as he is continually posting the list. And Roger, very eager to hear what you've selected for numbers 5 through 1 in your top 10 agricultural law and taxation developments of 2021. Next time we get together, we'll cover all of that. And many thanks to you, as always.
Thank you, Eric.
He is a professor of agricultural law and taxation, Washburn University School of Law. Roger McEowen will be back with more on Agriculture Today. For you now on Agriculture Today, a full preview of another series of informational opportunities, this time for you soybean producers. K-State's annual series of Soybean Schools has been scheduled now. It'll begin later this month and continue into February. Leading the organization of these, our guest now, Ignacio Ciampitti, Crop Production and Cropping Systems Specialist, K-State Research and Extension. And Ignacio, you team up with the good folks at the Kansas Soybean Commission to put these on, correct?
Yes, as always, Eric, thanks for the invitation. Yeah, and we are very grateful for all the support that usually we get from our soybean farmers across the state, and then awesome partnership with Kansas Soybean. So Kansas Soybean will be helping us with providing funding for the schools, locations, supporting all the facilities and also the lunch. And dinners in some situations. So we are very excited about this. So we have an excellent programs, 6 different soybean schools. Many of those, offered late January and then during the early February. We try to keep these schools very short but informative, going from weed control, production of the crop, insect management, disease management, fertilization. So we really have different type of topics, very diverse, but with the main goal for those farmers to go to a place and find most of the new updated research in terms of soybeans. So that's the intention of these programs.
And the information is packed in there. So although you're keeping it as expedient as possible, there's plenty in all aspects of soybean production and management that'll be covered.
Yeah, and also I imagine that this is an excellent opportunity for many of the farmers to see many of the researchers, that they work at K-State, that they do excellent work, and they have a unique opportunity just to hang around there, ask questions after the presentations. Make sure that all your questions that you have during the year while you are producing soybeans, they are taken care of.
These will take place on 3 specific days, but 2 each day. And walking through those dates very quickly here, January the 25th, that's a Tuesday, morning session in Beloit, evening session, late afternoon and evening session in Holton. On Tuesday, February the 1st, the morning session in Newton and the late afternoon evening session in Parsons that day, February 1st. Then February the 8th in Oakley. in the morning, in Great Bend from 3 to 7 that afternoon and evening. And you have spread these out throughout the state, so anybody basically growing soybeans in Kansas will have access to them, Ignacio.
Yeah, I mean, that was the main goal. We go, as you mentioned, Eric, really well. So we are going north central, then we move to the east central part, covering a little bit in the northeast. Then we move all the way to central Kansas, then to southeast. Then we go trying to push, as we know, many farmers are pushing the direction of going west. So we have a school in Oakley that we hope to get attention to some of the soybean farmers that they usually are working more on the irrigation. But we have seen some farmers in dryland that are pushing the boundaries of soybeans in the state. And then we move on the last one to Great Bend because we are seeing a large pocket of soybean farmers. One of the things that we want to emphasize, these topics and presentations are really, really tailored to the different regions. So when we are moving to one region that is more under irrigation or more high productivity, so the focus will be probably more on profits. And then when we are moving to western side of the state, we are starting to explore what are the practices and start going to the initial steps on the production.
These programs are rich with information, soybean growers, and you should take one of them in, and the location nearest you. We'll repeat those locations and dates in just a second. They're asking you to pre-register no later than Friday, January the 14th, and you can do that online at KSU Soybean and find out more information. The Kansas Soybean Commission website also has details on this. Lunch or dinner, depending on the location, will be provided. No cost to attend.
Also, one important point to highlight is that there are also opportunities for farmers that they are not that technology savvy and then don't want to go to a website. They can also reach out. We put all the information onto the county agents. So we're working really close to all the county agents in each of the locations. So for Beloit, Sandra Wick, Holton, we have David Hallowell, and Newton, we have Ryan Fleming. Parsons, we are working with James Cooper. Oakley, we are working with Kelsey Wirtz, and then Great Bend with Stacy Campbell. Excellent agents, more than willing just to take registrations and make sure that you get your name included on the online website. So don't get shy in terms of being a tech savvy. Don't worry. You can pick up the phone, call your county extension office, and we will make sure that you are registered for the schools.
Excellent. Ignacio, best of luck with these. Many thanks.
Thanks as always, Eric.
Ignacio Ciampitti, Crop Production, Cropping Systems Specialist, K-State Research and Extension. Here is the lineup for the 2022 K-State Soybean Schools. Again, on Tuesday, January the 5th, 2 schools in the morning at Beloit, late afternoon and evening in Holton. Tuesday, February the 1st, in the morning at Newton, late afternoon, early evening that day in Parsons. And then February the 8th, also a Tuesday, in the morning at Oakley, and late afternoon, early evening at Great Bend. You can contact the host extension offices to register, or you can go online and find out more at the Kansas Soybean Commission website or the K-State Department of Agronomy site likewise. Now, amidst all that information that will be passed along to attendees at these soybean schools will be the 2021 K-State Soybean Variety Performance Test report. The numbers are now all in, now available online, and soon to be at one's disposal in the traditional printed form. These trials overseen, as always, by longtime K-State soybean breeder Bill Schapaugh, who offers these observations on this year's performance test.
The 2021 results for the individual tests are completed, and they're reported online and available to producers online. And we're reporting on 13 different tests around the state this year, a mixture of irrigated and dryland trials.
How many entries were in this year's test?
We had about a little over 80 entries, so a good number. And a very broad mixture. We had 12 different companies and programs including some public programs, including our entries, but also entries from University of Arkansas and University of Missouri. We had really a mixture of trait packages in the trials. I mean, there was Extend Beans and Extend Flex and Enlist 3, E3, Liberty Link, Roundup Ready 1, conventional. They were all in there, all all combined in the same test, evaluated under the same conditions.
And we, of course, would steer producers in the direction of the data to see how all of these entries performed. The general growing conditions under which the test was conducted, it was a pretty good showing this year, wasn't it, Bill?
It was, again. I mean, we had some wet periods during the growing season for areas and some dry, particularly in August. It got pretty dry and fairly warm. But when you look at the data, the state yields are estimated to be, I believe, over 40 bushels per acre. At least that was back in August. So pretty good. Not a record, but pretty good yields. And the yields in the performance test reflect that. I mean, we had good yields, certainly above the trend line average for the state. And so lots of 40, 50, 60 bushel yields in the trials and a good separation, differentiation in the performance of the entries.
Well, again, as you said, the results are now online at the agronomy website, agronomy.ksu.edu. Look under the crop performance tests link there. There will be hard copies out soon as well, will there not, Bill?
Correct. There'll be printed versions available, and users can order those from the bookstore, or they'll also be able to download. The electronic version of those can be downloaded from the crop performance test website.
And as always, you encourage producers to use this information as part of their decision-making process.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got lots of information. You've got farm performance test plots. You've got county plots. There's results from other seed companies and so on, other farmers. So there's a lot of information out there. Put that all together to make a decision on variety release. You know, variety improvement is significant. It's incremental improvements year after year, but it adds up. You know, we're looking at Kansas probably at least a third of a bushel per acre per year, on average, is through genetic improvement of crops. So over time, it starts adding up and can have a substantial impact on the performance on the farm.
Bill Schapaugh there, soybean breeder, K-State's Department of Agronomy. Again, 13 soybean variety test sites around the state this year, irrigated and dryland. 81 different varieties, 12 different companies and programs represented in the trials this year. You can access the numbers a variety of ways, including going right now online to the K-State Agronomy website. That's agronomy.ksu.edu. And search for crop performance tests, or you can order the printed version out of the K-State Research and Extension bookstore online, ksre.ksu.edu/bookstore. We'd urge you soybean growers to take full advantage of that data and make it part of your bean variety selection decisions for planting this coming spring. We'll return in a few moments with more for you here on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. Stop, look, and listen.
When snowfall turns into a snowstorm or blizzard, any beauty the snow may have had is lost.
That's Gus van Der Hoeven of Kansas State University with comment on life in rural Kansas.
When snowfall turns into a snowstorm or blizzard, any beauty the snow may have had is lost in upcoming fear and sense of danger for those who travel in it. Driving along roads in western Kansas trying to get ahead of a storm is something one does not forget. Country roads are straight lines, but they are hidden in all the white snow. Only the dark telephone poles stand out as a guide to steer your car along the crest of the road. With poor vision, you move from pole to pole, with each pole coming out from the flying snow as you move along. The road, the ditch, and the wheat fields are all white and look alike. On the open road, snow settles in the ditches and creates an ever-moving blanket. Places where a slight dip in a road or bank where snow piles up are treacherous. From behind the wheel, the world looks empty and white, with darkness coming on, and silent snow engulfing the car from all sides and above. It's a winter landscape most people don't want to see. It can be terrifying and deadly for those who don't know the country. Even for those who know it, the winter storms hold dangers. The sweeping wind and the flying snowflakes changes familiar landmarks in a blinding world. The intense cold becomes numbing. Years ago, trying to break out of a snowstorm, I drove such roads, and while moving along, I remember noticing a herd of cows standing crowded together with their arched backs turned into the storm. They were bunched together with their heads low to the ground, pushing against a temporary electric fence which was holding them in the wheat field where they had been grazing. Holding them, but for how long? The answer was in the pickup truck standing off the road waiting for the worst part of the storm, which was yet to come. They were holding the cattle as there was now nothing else they could do to stop them of breaking through the thin wire and moving on ahead of the storm. As I passed the four-wheel vehicle, I got a quick glance at the warmly dressed men in the cab. Their collars were up, and their caps pulled over their ears. The idling engine kept them fairly comfortable. Modern cowboys watching over their cattle. The scene has stayed with me, and it reminded me of a winter scene painting by Charles M. Russell, who was a painter of the West. Russell's painting, Lost in a Snowstorm, shows two cowboys on horseback, lost in a blizzard at a time when there were no fences. They've met up with some native Indians who, through sign language, tell them how to meet up with their friends. The Indians are huddled in warm, colorful blankets on their ponies, which seem to stand on clouds with swirling snow around their feet. The breath of the horses is like steam blowing for the wind. The lost cowboys are bitterly cold, holding their ears. In the gray distance, the blizzard. For thousands of years, part of the Kansas winter landscape.
Gus van Der Hoeven of Kansas State University with his weekly commentary on life in rural Kansas. Our time's away once more. Thanks for tuning in. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today. Over this, the K-State Radio Network.